On this episode of the show, I have with me Chandni Jain. She's the VP of Engineering at Checkr. So we're going to talk about why it's so hard to build that culture of ownership and how do you foster it. And we'll talk about whether it's top down, bottoms up, and some takeaways in there. And hopefully, Chandni, we'll get through all of that with you. But I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on Tech Track. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. All right, before we dive in, tell everyone what Checkr does.
Yeah, so Checkr actually provides background check and identity verification for companies that hire and onboard employees. We use a lot of AI and automation to make it fast and make the process also fair and efficient and compliant. So, yeah, if you're hiring for your company, check out Checkr.
This episode, we're going to talk about ownership and how do you foster that culture. Building a culture with ownership is not easy. So when we say having a culture of ownership, what do we mean by that?
Yeah, culture of ownership really means when every single person in the company is really not thinking about the task at hand for them, but they're really thinking about it from the outcome, from customer's perspective. So coming from engineering, if an engineer is asked what they're working on and why they're working on, if the response is because I was asked so to do, that's a complete no-no. They should be able to articulate the reason behind what they are building and how this will have a customer impact. How would this improve customer experience or delight the customers better? Like that's really the culture of ownership. So the conversation moves from being at a task level to really an outcome level. And it's really, again, like it's a culture, it's embedded deep into the organization.
Okay. It is sometimes more of an art than science to get people to buy into ownership because there's a component of accountability that we all also don't like. How do you balance building a culture of ownership as well as accountability side by side?
Yeah, so honestly, ownership and accountability are part of this culture, right? You cannot have one without the other. The other part is really that there's accountability, there's also empowerment, which is part of this, right? So all these together is when the culture of ownership really work. I think few things that need to be done to really make this work is one is bring a lot of clarity on what that ownership looks like. You cannot own what you don't understand. And if there is not enough good context provided or priorities keep changing, again, the team follows more, they default to following orders instead of actually taking initiatives. And the other is what you touched upon is psychological safety. If people feel that they might be penalized if they come up with creative ways and think about initiatives, they might want to play safe as well. So again, providing that psychological safety because you're taking ownership, you are empowered to try out new things. But then if yes, the outcome is not there, you will be held accountable, but that doesn't mean that there should be fear of failure there. You have to give that space to let people try out new things.
I like that. So let's actually go deeper into that. So when we're talking about wanting people to try things, obviously there's accountability. Accountability is not always, we take it as a negative, but it doesn't have to be a negative. It doesn't mean a negative consequence. It can be a learning experience quite often. I guess when we're looking at implementing this correctly so that your team, an individual feels confident when they take ownership, when they take accountability, it doesn't turn into a culture of blame. That's a very, very fine line. When you're looking at that line of trying to avoid the culture of blame versus accountability, I guess talk to us about how you've seen it play out. What are some of the things you have to do to ensure that you get the one you want, not the other you don't want?
Yeah. Again, a lot of things at play here. One is leadership needs to model ownership as well. When the teams see that this ownership is across all the chain of organization and it's just not onto the teams and the ICs, I think that's when it becomes real. When a leader, when a VP of engineering comes back and says, hey, this decision that fail is on me, I think that just builds a lot of trust and psychological safety that it's not about blame, it's really about learning. We tried something and it just didn't work out, right? So one is really modeling ownership across. The other thing that we really do at Checkr is we talk a lot about blameless culture. And this really plays out well even within engineering as part of incidents. We have incidents and best of our engineers like mistakes. Everybody's human. So every post-mortem of incident, we start by saying this is a blameless retro, right? Let's focus on the systems and the processes and what assumptions failed us instead of talking about who did this. So it's really again shifting the thought process from who versus like what are the right guardrails that need to be there? Is there more testing that needed to be done, right? Is there more kind of monitoring, alerting, right? So it's more about the right processes and systems in the place so that we don't like the humans who will still make mistakes. They are the right checks and balances in the place that will hold us from making those mistakes. So it's more about again changing the conversation from like just removing the blame from there. I would also say at the end, like, accountability still needs to be there, right? But it's we are holding people accountable for how we respond to them and how we learn from them as well. So there is accountability at the end, like, yes, there are incidents, but we cannot even keep having the same issues again and again. We need to learn from them and respond from them as well.
Absolutely. I guess when you look at management's role with this dynamic, right? Building this culture of ownership, you don't want to go down a culture of blame, you want accountability. When you look at the management, is this a top-down thing or a bottoms-up thing? I guess from because you said
Yeah.
leadership, so who drives this? Is it mutual? How does it work?
Yeah, I would say it's both, honestly. From leaders' perspective, again, the leaders should be providing a lot of clarity, context, and the why behind what we are doing. And the team comes back with the initiatives, the creative thinking, and the follow through. But I would also say hey, the other part that I said earlier, like what people miss is leadership also has to model ownership. Leaders need to own their decisions, they need to follow through on their commitments, and that's where really again it becomes real. So yes, it's very bottoms up because I want to see champions, people with high agency within the teams, because they will be the role models for the rest of the folks. But if it comes across as leaders are demanding ownership and not really modeling it, then it just loses its purpose. So I would say it's kind of both, and it meets in the middle. It's everybody together in the organization.
Absolutely. When you're looking at the management objectives and you're looking at times when the team has to be pushed, right? There's a stretch goal. Obviously, people are stepping up. We always want people to take ownership, and these are times when things don't go well. When you look at those postmortems, when you look at those, opportunities to dissect when things haven't gone right, what kind of how do you deliver that feedback? Because I think feedback's really hard. I think a lot of people don't do feedback well. I think feedback is one of those things where people think they do it well, but when push comes to shove, they end up missing the pieces that needs to be a little bit more blunt, and they sugarcoat along the way, or they're just so blunt that people just get taken aback and they're not receptive. When you provide that feedback, talk to us a little bit about what have you seen work in terms of delivering it for the right message to get through?
Great topic again, and I think we can have a full podcast just talking about feedback. Again, one of my favorite topics because a lot of times, again, a lot of junior leaders, it's hard for them to deliver feedback and they think they're delivering the feedback, but if the message is not like absorbed on the other side, it's really not delivered, right? So, yes, when things go wrong, right? So, I think even before the feedback, what is important is building trust with the team and the individuals to even be able to get to a place where you have credibility that you are giving feedback, right? So starting from that position, again, like as I join any new organization, teams, my first thing is how do I build trust and credibility so that they really understand that Chandni's here, she got our back, she's here to help us, enable us, make us 10x and not like to micromanage, right? I'm really like thinking from servant leadership. I'm here to help the team. How do we really go and thrive in where we are? Like, how do I just kind of empower them and make them highly performant? So that's the first thing. Like, I need to build that trust before I start doing feedback, right? And then as things, for example, doesn't go well, I would again like think about there are different elements to it, but starting with an individual. Is it a director or a senior manager? I need to give that feedback, right? And that's going to be very much in private, right? And I think over the years, I feel I've become really good and candid in the feedback as well, where I make sure the message is really received. It's not sugar coated. And again, starting with the position that I'm here for your success, right? This feedback is a gift, right? And this is just not think about your current situation. Think about how the learnings you can take from this is going to help you across your career in future as well. So it's more about I'm invested in your success. Like this feedback I'm giving you is again not it's point in time, very focused, but the learnings will help you, right? Maybe this is an opportunity for you to think about the skill set that didn't work out, right? Maybe you didn't push back, maybe the team was too slow, right? We didn't like whatever it was, like what do we need to do to really turn this around? So that's the kind of feedback, like, making sure the team is in.
So far we've kind of seen a bit of a nesting effect of drilling into the team and looking at accountability, looking at ownership, looking at feedback. When we're looking at more day to day and we want to give people latitude, we want them to take ownership, which means you have to give them some slack. How closely do we want to follow up? Like obviously there's one-on-ones, there's maybe daily stand-ups. Like what are we doing on a more granular level to make sure that we've given this person the ability to step up, quote unquote, but we
Right.
haven't just like given them too much rope either. Like there's this balance of, you have to earn a little bit more, be a little bit more confident. When you look at that little balance on more of a day-to-day micro level, how do you view that latitude you give someone?
Yeah. And, again, I think this depends. Like, again, I think about like my leadership style is situational leadership, right? It depends from person to person. Like somebody I've worked for a long time and I've like who's built a lot of credibility, gained trust. I give them a lot of rope because I know they can just run with it, right? Versus somebody else where I feel there's potential, but they need some help. I would step in, lean in more as a sounding board and guidance for them so that they don't completely deviate, still giving them enough rope so that they are making their own decisions, etc. I also want to talk about, so at Checkr, we have ownership is one of our core values and we live by it every single day. I see that like in our kind of conversations and like the decisions we are making. We've adopted this framework called DRI culture, which really stands for directly responsible individual. I think this started from Apple, if I'm not wrong. But really, what DRI means is there's a single individual which we've identified at a company level that is responsible for that initiative or for project. And that really helps clarify like a lot of confusion that might be on roles and responsibility, etc. Now, the DRI doesn't mean that this person has to completely own everything and marching alone, solo, doing everything. That's not the purpose. The purpose is the buck stops at you. Like you are the person who's thinking about this initiative day in and day out, right? And you are helping unblocking your team. You are helping make decisions, right? So you don't have to constantly get approvals from the top as well, right? And so I think that's where, like, at leadership level, we are thinking a lot about who are the people who are really ready to be DRIs and for what level and magnitude of initiatives as well. If this is a company level, like we should be feeling good about this person can really run with it, right? If it's, and then there can be DRIs at a team level initiative as well, where there is more kind of, leeway if, for taking risks and for taking different, if things do go kind of sideways as well. So it's, the answer is really depends. And I think, again, that this is great opportunity to find people and give them and challenge them and get them in an uncomfortable position to be able to try being that DRI and running as an owner there.
Absolutely. I love that viewpoint as well. I guess when you're looking at, I guess, more recent managers, right? At least people recently moving into leadership and they're leaving that IC world, they're moving into their first management role. And this this is a challenge because they're so used to jumping in to the details. That's where they lived. For first-time managers who are trying to instill ownership in their team, I guess what are some of the challenges and what are some of the things that they can do to help improve this skill?
Yeah, great question. I think the first time managers definitely need a lot more mentorship and guidance from their leaders as well. So that's one thing I would start with, right? So they should not be afraid of like asking for help where they need help, right? But some of the challenges, biggest challenges is how do they step away from constantly being the tech lead and empower and let their teams be owner. Like that's the big balance to see, right? Because they know it all, they know what needs to be done, and it's much faster for them to just do it instead of letting the team do it. So they need to step back, they need to ask the right questions so that the team sees and can understand their viewpoint and is able to lead. Right. So then I'm not saying they need to totally step away from being technical. They absolutely, like, all my managers, all my leaders are still very technical, but the people part becomes super important for them, and that's new for them. So they need to focus a lot on growing their team, right? What are the opportunities? How do they kind of match the skill set with the right opportunities so that they're amplifying everybody's strength? So it's more about how do they balance, how do they bring more ownership and empowerment instead of doing it all by themselves. And honestly, I've seen this, like, first line managers failing when I realize that they together are doing amazing, but they go on a week's vacation and the team just falls apart, right? And that's when they haven't really like made the team successful because nobody stands up as a leader when in their absence.
I love that. That's some great advice. And maybe, yeah, one step further, when we're looking at generally for advice for leaders to build this sort of culture so that, again, I think a lot of people say they want ownership and they want people to step up. And I think you kind of highlighted a ton of different areas. What are some things, and again, if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, I already think I do that, it's good to have a checklist to go, oh, I agree with Chandni. I'm doing those same things. What's a couple of checklist items to make sure to evaluate that you have set up this kind of culture of ownership at your org?
Yeah. So I would say first thing is start with yourself, right? Like ownership really begins with you as a leader. The team mirrors what they see. So you need to show up as an owner. And honestly, ownership is not something we talk about and make that happen. It's really about like small, consistent moments where the team is seeing leaders follow through, come back, owning their mistakes, all that. But I also have this mantra of like four things that I have seen and has worked across. Like I would go into a team, I would see this team is not performing well, and I would do these four things, and I would just really see the team like turn around, and it feels like magic. Those four things are like, again, going back to context and clarity. Like that's number one thing, right? Bring a lot of context, start talking to the team, help them kind of understand where or why we need to do something. The second is autonomy. Give them some leeway, right? Give them rope so that they need to come out of this following orders to actually thinking, right? Because a lot of times things people say it's gonna come top down. I'm just gonna do what they want to do, what they want me to do, right? So you want them to think about and really come up with creative ways. You have them because they are smart and you want their ideas to come out, right? The third is again going back and showing them the impact visibility. You should be able to help them connect the dots from what they're working on and how will this really impact the customer. And the fourth is recognition. Celebrate every small win. Again, at Checkr, like we have this a Slack channel called Eng Wins, and every small thing we put in there, right? It's a great way to call out really people and give shout outs to anything they're doing and how, as leaders, we should be able to articulate again and tell how this small thing is impacting the customer in a huge way. So I would say those four things are the things like think about context and clarity, autonomy, impact, visibility, and recognition. You need to recognize your people. You need to figure out who are your high agency people and like, just give them a lot of place to be there. For the ICs, I would say start taking ownership, right? Don't wait for somebody to come and ask you to take ownership, right? Ownership is really leadership. And again, you don't need a title for that. You just have to run with it. Again, like my big mantra is don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. So, jump into it. Your leaders will see you and they will give you bigger opportunities. So that's how this will begin.
I love that. That's great advice. And I think, as you said, so stepping up and just trying something and like you said, asking for forgiveness, I think these are all great cues, especially on the individual contributor side. And I think sometimes maybe the final question for you is when we are asking people, we were looking for people to step up, and you mentioned the celebration. I actually think that's not spoken about enough because We all like to receive recognition. And when you step up, I think to celebrate, hey, this person stepped up, this person did this. I love the fact that you guys have a Slack channel. And I guess, just to kind of understand that better, because I think sometimes people do similar. How wide does that go? Is that org wide? Is it per team? Or how does that recognition get distributed? Because sometimes, and especially if we move into DevOps and shared services and stuff like that, they even have less visibility because they're not 100% always seen as the person shipping something directly.
Yeah, so great question. And something again, like I've spent a lot of thought into it. So this Engines channel I'm talking about is a public channel that like my CEO is there, the COO is there, right? And when there are like these big wins, which also have like, direct customer impact, we tag them. And they, again, like going back to one of our core values of humility as well, like they would jump in to congratulate individuals as well, be this person is in platform team, core services team, which might be too far removed as well from the customer. So again, as leaders, like that's one of our big thing. We also have this thing called Bonusly every month that all of us get, and which converts into like actually gift cards etc for people. And then we make sure like we are looking at different things, small deeds the team is doing, and making sure like as again like VP of engineering, I'm sending these bonusly to even my ICs where I'm seeing like pockets of high agency ownership, things they are doing. So there are various different ways than all hands, company all hands, NGO all hands, which might be more at an initiative level. We actually recently launched MCP, right? Again, MCP is like, this was not part of the product kind of roadmap. We did this as quickly as a hackathon, and then I quickly created a Tiger team to get some people together and, let's just get our prototype out. And a couple of folks, again, they just jumped into it, like folks with high agency. And like I'm making sure they get recognized. They are in our best of the most challenging projects, right? So again, I think it's more about thinking about it and making sure the recognition happens across the company.
I love it. Chandni, I appreciate you coming on, sharing. This is one of those topics somebody might have a follow-up. Yeah, we have talked about a couple of different things in here, and these are
Yeah.
all probably potentially hour-long discussions on each of these
Yeah.
areas. How can someone get in contact with you? What's a good way of touching base with you for a follow-up question?
LinkedIn is a great place. I'm very good at DMing and connecting as well. So maybe, that's a great place to connect with me. Love to hear
Okay,
from people.
love it. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for joining the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Amir, for having me here. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. That's it for the episode. We'll be back again. Different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think Johnny talked a lot about what this culture of ownership looks like. And we talked about accountability. We talked about feedback. We talked about making sure you don't slip into a culture of blame, actually. And she had some feedback, some tips with your leadership or you're an IC of what this means for you and how you can actually handle ownership in your organization. So please share this episode with somebody else who might enjoy it and benefit from it. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.